Washington canceled the Hasan Piker event, by the way. Instead of abiding by the principle of free expression on college campuses.
Well, there's a first time for everything, I guess, because I kind of have to defend Hasan Piker. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, your home for independent and nonpartisan commentary and analysis on politics, media, internet culture, and more. And buckle up, because we're going to dive into the always fascinating and somehow constantly full of drama and insane stuff world of Hasan Piker, the far-left socialist streamer who is, of course, known for his viral, unhinged rhetoric at times, but also for the kind of insurgent political movement he is taking over the Democratic Party with, alongside the Democratic Socialists of America, this far-left group that we've been over, their really radical agenda and all of that. But now he's involved in another controversy where, for perhaps the first time ever, I kind of do have to defend Hasan Piker. We're going to break it all down. I'm going to explain the nuances of the situation for you. I'm sure everybody will be totally cool and normal about that because they always are. Here's the headline from Jewish News Service, jns.org. Breaking: University of Washington cancels Hasan Piker event. So essentially, the University of Washington, a public university, was supposed to host Hasan Piker, but then canceled this event under pressure. Here's a clip of him reacting to and explaining what happened. Then we'll get into the details, and I'll give you my take.
Yeah, University of Washington canceled the Hasan Piker event, by the way. Daniel Bessner invited me to UW. I was like, sure, I'll do it. And they got inundated with a barrage of botted emails, and then also they probably got a boss call, let's be real. And instead of abiding by the principle of free expression on college campuses, they chose to do this. And the reality of the matter is, if this had happened to Charlie Kirk, or if this had happened to Ben Shapiro, this would be the #1 news story on Fox News for a month. Will liberal outlets cover it with the same intensity? Or will they brush past the message or even agree with it?
So a couple things to point out about what Hasan said just there. He's referring to UW professor Daniel Bessner, who is apparently a former Bernie Sanders advisor and is the one that invited Hasan to participate in this series. And then the ironic thing about it, he might be right that when similar instances like this of a controversial speaker being canceled or blocked at the last minute did happen in the past, they were major news stories. And that typically did focus on people who were conservative or controversial or offensive from the right wing, right? A Ben Shapiro, a Charlie Kirk. I'm not saying they necessarily are offensive, but they were perceived that way by campus communities and by progressive activists. Now, the funny thing about that example is, one, okay, Charlie Kirk was shot for his beliefs, so maybe don't compare yourself to him. But the Ben Shapiro example, ironically enough, in a conversation several years ago with Charlie Kirk, he was talking to Charlie Kirk, Hasan Piker was asked about the deplatforming and censorship on college campuses of folks like Ben Shapiro, and he responded by saying that, quote, maybe Shapiro should be less offensive. So, Hasan, maybe you should be less offensive. Now, of course, I don't believe that, but it is a little bit funny. And he did ultimately, in that conversation, go on to admit that, no, people shouldn't be blocked. And in an ideal world, people should be able to speak. It's like, how good of you? But it's like his first response to Shapiro was to victim blame him. So maybe he should have a little bit of that same energy for himself. Anyway, though, that's not my belief. I do support free speech and open debate on college campuses. So we're going to need more details and then come to a kind of conclusion about what happened here. Back to this JNS article. I'm happy that the University of Washington, for literally the first time ever, has made the correct decision to not have an America-hating communist spread his hatred and terrible ideology to young people at our taxpayer-funded universities, Travis Couture, a Republican state representative, told JNS. Obviously, universities are a place for First Amendment free speech, but someone who said that America deserves 9/11 and that capitalist blood should spill in the street should not be someone we are promoting with our tax dollars, Couture said. A state lawmaker told JNS on Background that multiple state legislators and groups, including Jewish ones, pressed the university to drop the event. So there you have a Republican state lawmaker echoing honestly what sounds like a lot of the rhetoric we heard for many years from progressives about, well, they don't have a right to be platformed, and they have this opinion I don't like and this opinion I don't like. And then on background, apparently they're reporting that there was a pressure campaign to get this speech canceled. Anyway, before we get into kind of more of my take, I want to read you a statement from Turning Point USA's Andrew Colvett, who is, of course, conservative and an ally, a longtime ally of Charlie Kirk. He wrote on X, "Let the radical Mao-loving communist Hasan Piker speak, so long as he can resist the urge to call for the death of his political opponents. Universities do this to TPUSA often and blame some administrative error, etc. It's wrong. Let him speak. Let conservatives speak peacefully." I appreciate that from Andrew, and I think he makes a good point that this is something similar where they don't come out and say that it's because of ideology or beliefs that they cancel an event, but they cite some sort of administrative or procedural thing that's really a cover, because it sure seems at least that this was done at the behest of people who don't like what Hasan has to say. So that's an issue. And remember, guys, this is a public college campus, a taxpayer-funded institution, so it is bound by the First Amendment, and it's not allowed to ideologically discriminate against speakers or to censor speeches or stop events based on people objecting to the opinions being expressed, yet it sure seems, at least, subject to more information, like that is exactly what has happened here. Now, we're going to get into this statement from the Nonpartisan Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE. Disclaimer, I do a small amount of freelance work with them, but they are the nation's preeminent, nonpartisan, non-ideological, beyond free speech organization that advocates for the First Amendment and free speech and has some of the best experts in the country on their staff. Anyway, here's their statement on X. The University of Washington canceled its scheduled Hasan Piker event after the university said the planning process, quote, did not meet the necessary level of rigor. They say, and the FIRE says in the statement, if the decision was based on process and not public backlash or criticism, University of Washington should be transparent about what standards were not met and how they were applied. Public universities can set standards for events, but they can't use those standards as cover for canceling a speaker because of their views. So I guess what they're saying here, FIRE, is that theoretically a university is allowed to have non-ideological standards for speakers. You must have this qualification, or this proper procedure must be followed, and that's fine. They are allowed to enforce that, and they could theoretically cancel a speech if it didn't comply. But what you can't do is use those kinds of procedural pretexts when what you're really doing is just shutting a speech down because you're afraid he's going to say things that are too controversial, or because you're getting a pressure campaign from state lawmakers or from outside advocacy groups. That's what I suspect is really happening here. So there should be a lot more pressure placed on this university. They should have to be completely transparent about what happened here. And I will say this, I am one of Hasan Piker's biggest critics. I think he is an extremist. I think he uses reprehensible and dangerous rhetoric, but he is an American citizen. He does have First Amendment rights, and so do the people that wanted to bring him to this group, to speak on this campus, rather. So, if it is in fact the case that they tried to shut down the speech using some procedural BS as an excuse, but really it was in response to this pressure campaign or fear of backlash, then that is almost certainly unconstitutional. That is censorship. That is a First Amendment violation. And so I don't support that whatsoever, and they should be held accountable for it. And there's some layers here as well that I want to get into. For example, apparently a lot of the advocacy against Piker speaking on campus has come from Jewish groups or had to do with Israel or what have you. And I certainly don't for a second dispute the idea that he said lots of radical and upsetting and controversial things about those issues. But at the end of the day, that's all fair game. That's all free speech. That's all First Amendment protected to have those debates and those discussions. And a college campus in particular is supposed to be a home for debate on even the most contentious issues, including people find things that the pro-Israel side of the debate says extremely offensive and upsetting, and would use a lot of the same rhetoric about safety or dehumanization or violence or bigotry or what have you to shut down a hardcore pro-Israel speaker. I'm always going to be on the side that says people from both sides of even the most extreme and contentious debates must be allowed to make their case. And while I certainly am sympathetic to the very real problem of anti-Semitism in this country, just the same way, I don't believe that trans students need safe spaces. I don't believe black students need safe spaces. I don't believe gay students need safe spaces. I don't believe Muslim students need safe spaces when you're going to have a speaker come that's going to be harshly critique Islam. So even if you take at face value an idea that he would dispute, and we could debate about whether Hasan is in some way anti-Semitic, I don't accept the idea that they need to protect Jewish students from having this. Frankly, if we're being honest about the actual state of what Jewish people believe, there's probably a lot of young Jewish people on that campus who like Hasan and who agree with him. So we should really grapple with that. And to the people who are outraged or horrified by his views, whether they're Jewish or not, they don't have to listen. They don't have to attend. But protecting them or keeping them safe from ideas is not a concept I'm on board with or believe in whatsoever. Anyway, the next thing that people are saying to kind of defend the idea of Hasan being censored here is, well, he's advocated for violence in the past. And that is true to an extent, and I've harshly criticized the violent statements he's made. I've called them out over and over and over again. But two things. One is he hasn't never been charged with a crime related to incitement of violence or anything like that. So what could happen is if he were to use this college speaking event to go and directly incite violence, then you could pursue him for that because that is not protected free speech under very narrow conditions. But the fact that he has on occasion in the past advocated for violence in some way doesn't mean that somehow, therefore he has no First Amendment rights going forward, and they can just discriminate against him at public institutions based on his viewpoint. That does not follow, and frankly, that's not something you should want to follow, because one, it's just legally not the case, and two, frankly, a lot of mainstream people in politics have at one point or another said something that could be construed as advocating for violence. And I think that's wrong, but it doesn't mean that therefore they are disqualified from public debate and conversation for life, and that suddenly now universities can discriminate against them because of their viewpoints or their speech, and that somehow doesn't violate the First Amendment. It's like any individual instance where someone crosses the line into incitement of violence can be addressed on its own merits, but it doesn't therefore just strip that person of constitutional rights or the ability to engage in public debate in the public square just into infinity or into eternity. It doesn't work like that, and it can never work like that. And so the next piece here is, and I do think there's some truth to this, is that people are saying, well, Hasan doesn't believe in free speech. Hasan doesn't believe in the open debate and the marketplace of ideas. He has disdain for these ideas of classical liberalism, and he is, in many ways an authoritarian. I agree, but that's kind of irrelevant because we believe in those things. So we have to uphold and stand for them consistently, regardless of whether or not somebody else does. And I mean, frankly, it's like the law makes no distinction. The Constitution makes no distinction between the protections it affords American citizens based on whether or not they agree with those protections or not. And as soon as you start saying, well, we support free speech, but only for people who support free speech as well, then you're just creating a caveat or an excuse, or somehow all I have to do to disqualify you from free speech protections is just find a way to label you as someone who doesn't support free speech. So it's kind of a paradox here, but yes, you must, there's like the famous old saying, I might disagree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. It's like, we have to uphold that even for people who don't actually stand for that themselves necessarily, because it really is an all or nothing thing. We're either all protected by this, or once we start chipping away at it and making exception after exception, and that's somehow allowed to stand, it really, at that point, it could be done to any of us, right? So I don't believe that somehow gets you off the hook for it. And the final piece that I always say whenever we talk about these deplatforming or censorship stories is what is your goal here exactly? Is your goal to diminish Hasan Piker's influence, to make him less popular, to somehow harm or sabotage his career? Because if that's the goal of these advocacy groups that seemingly pressured this university to stop him from speaking, it's definitely going to do the opposite. I don't know. We've seen this with Ben Shapiro and Charlie Kirk and all of these other folks, that when you censor them on college campuses, or you try to block them from speaking to young people, and you say they're too dangerous or that they're not safe or anything like this, it tends to have the opposite effect, right? It gets them this huge press cycle that is often very sympathetic. It makes them a much bigger deal, a much bigger news story than they would have been if they'd just done their campus event with no incident. And it gives them this kind of forbidden fruit effect, like, oh, Hasan Piker is so edgy. He's so cool. They think they're trying to stop us from even listening to him. I want to hear what he has to say now. I mean, heck, this is why we have freak extremists like Nick Fuentes, who somehow have people that tune into them, partly because they were censored wrongly, in my view, and they got this kind of forbidden fruit effect. So even on its own terms, which I don't support, trying to deplatform Hasan Piker from college campuses is only going to make his appeal stronger. So it doesn't even make sense on its own terms. The whole thing is just a ridiculous, ridiculous situation. And I do think that people who genuinely believe in free speech and the First Amendment, which a lot of Republicans claim to care about for a long time, and some do, but some clearly don't. I mean, you have Republican lawmakers cheering on this censorship. And it's like, what? All of a sudden, you guys are the ones that want safe spaces and to stop the controversial ideas on campus. And, well, they might have the right to say it, but they don't have the right to be platformed. It's like, okay, that's literally, you've just totally flipped the entire script that we dealt with for years and disagreed with on the progressive side. But other than that, you're doing amazing. So listen, I'm going to continue to call out Hasan and critique him. I think he is a uniquely noxious voice in our politics, and that he stands for a set of ideas that I find abhorrent, dangerous, and radical. But at the end of the day, even folks like him have First Amendment rights. They are American citizens, and I am not willing to compromise any of that just to, in some futile and counterproductive attempt to somehow shut down Hasan Piker. That's my take on this all, but you guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit the like button while you're at it and consider becoming a channel member. These are the kinds of nuanced takes that unfortunately aren't always the best business model for me. People really like it if you just stick to bashing one side and pandering to the other side, or vice versa. I try to be honest and independent and just give you guys my real take on things. And yeah, so I do need support from viewers like you. Hit the join button or click the link in the description to become a channel member. It's the best way to support my work. With that, guys, we'll leave it there for this one and be back with more real soon.